I'm Liz Davey, and welcome to A Walk in the Garden with Liz Davey. And this is my garden here in Norfolk. And we're starting out in the herb garden, as we usually do. And the herbs have been growing quite well. And there are quite a number that we can harvest, but we can also plant some more. And I have purchased a few plants. Many of them are less hardy, but now that the temperature has really warmed up and our nights are about 50 degrees, you can start putting in all of the tender plants. It's been pretty dry here the last week or so, so we have to make sure we water as we plant. I've got 3 plants that I'm going to be putting in today, and the first is a Stevia. And Stevia is often used as a sugar substitute, and this one is looking pretty good, and it has a nice label in it, which I will keep with the plant until I can add my own label. I added labels to the plants that I've put in, and I guess we need a trowel and some water in order to plant them. And I've done my own little labels with paint so that I know which herbs are. I don't label every plant in my garden, but I'm going to put the Stevia in right here. This is an annual plant in our climate, more of a tropical. And I'll add a little water to the planting hole so that its roots will have something to latch onto right away. And this one is in quite, and you'll notice that the root ball is wound around pretty well. So I want to break that up so that the plant's roots will not just keep circling it, but will go into the surrounding soil a little better. And we'll put it into the hole and fill it in, at making sure that it's at the same depth it was when it was growing. And we'll water that in and give it a good drink. We really need to do that and make sure that it's firmed in well. And again, I'll use my trowel to kind of make sure it's in place. Keep an eye on that for the next week or so to make sure that it's spreading out its roots and continuing to grow. And it will need more water. The next one I'm going to do is some cilantro that I started from seed. And again, I'll dig a hole and bring my water over. I plant cilantro in my vegetable garden as well, and I usually have some that comes up voluntarily. And provides me with an early crop. But I decided to plant a few of the seeds this year, and it's done quite well and formed some good roots. And again, we want to make sure that those roots are going to spread out instead of just circling around. And I'll get down and add that. We'll move that label over and then fill it in to the same area where it was growing. And I have a stick with that on it until I can get one of the other labels made. And again, give it a good drink, especially when it's warm. The best time to put in plants is on a cloudy day, right before a rain. But you can't always manage that, so be sure to water things well. And this should pop up nicely once it gets started to be established. I have another plant called Roman Chamomile, also a tender plant. And this one doesn't have quite as many roots wound around it, but it does have a few. And again, we'll move that sign and dig down a little bit. There is some dampness down a little deeper in the soil. Also a few rocks, which we will put aside. Bring up the water and give it a little. And pop that in, and again, bring the soil up around it. And give it a good drink. This has a little white flour on it. You can add it to hair rinse. It's supposed to be very nice as a hair rinse. Have a nice fragrance. And again, put a label on this. It's an attractive little plant, and it gives some variety to the leaf shapes, the tall spikes and the other leaf shapes with its finer foliage. Now, what can we pick in this garden? We can pick oregano, sorrel, chives, lemon balm, lime balm, tarragon, and one of my favorites, sweet woodruff. There's also a little mint coming, but it's not really pickable yet unless you really need a sprig of mint. But this is sweet woodruff. It grows in the shade, which this area now is a little more shady than I wish it were, but there is a tree here, so we're getting some shade. And the sweet woodruff is now in bloom. It smells kind of like new mown hay. And it is the herb for May wine, which is a German concoction. And we will make some mock May wine later. The real stuff uses wine and usually champagne, and is served with strawberries, which are also soon going to be in season and are in some areas of the country. So that pretty much concludes what we need to do in the herb garden, is keep planting and watering and enjoying. That's the main thing. So now let's move over to the perennial garden. This year I've put out an orange on this little holder that I bought at a flea market a long time ago. And this is to hopefully attract some Baltimore Orioles. They love fruit, and we've had them in this area before, so I'm hoping to encourage them. The other thing that you can put out on a saucer or somehow is grape jelly. It tends to draw some ants, so I like the idea of hanging the orange half. And hopefully we'll see a Baltimore Oriole come down for a sip of orange juice at some point. I have a couple grapes, and they do give me a few grapes, but the birds usually eat most of them, and the oriole might eat those too. And at any rate, I have pruned them this year. I took off any dead growth, and we like them to kind of go over the arbor and provide a little shady spot. So I don't trim them back too hard. I leave some of the pieces out and let them form branches out to make the grape clusters. And pruning grapes helps with the production of the fruit. If you are growing them for fruit, you'll need to really look into how to prune them and what you can do to optimize your harvest. In the perennial garden we have azaleas in bloom. And I have some pink ones, and I also have some white ones, and they really give a splash of color to the garden when they're in bloom. Otherwise, they're just kind of a nice green shrub. This little plant is called Star of Bethlehem. I did not plant it. I don't know where it came from, but it seems to come up every year and give me some white blooms. It doesn't seem to spread too vigorously, though it probably spread by a bird from somewhere. But we enjoy it while it's here. This plant is Kamasa, and it's from a bulb, and it has the pale blue flowers. It often grows in damp places, though this one seems to be doing quite well in full sun where it's dry. I also have one in the backyard in a shadier position where it's wet. This is a Columbine, and it's a spurless one. Yeah, many of the Columbines have long spurs on the back of the flower. This one does not. It spreads prolifically. As you can see, I have them here and there. And I've had plenty to share over the years. The lilies are coming up, and it's the time to watch for those awful red lily beetles. And so I kind of go through every day looking for them, and this year I've only found one. A number of years ago they released a parasitic fly in Rhode Island, and I think it's doing its job, because prior to that you just couldn't grow lilies in this area. They would be totally eaten by these horrible red beetles, and the larvae of said beetles that were even more vigorous in their consumption. So now we can do that, and so I think it's safe to start growing lilies again. You do have to watch them, and you will find one or two beetles which can be squashed, and they also lay eggs on the back of the flowers, and you can watch for those on the back of the leaves, I'm sorry. And if you see a band of yellow eggs, those too can be squashed and prevent the lilies from being eaten. Last year the rabbits did a number on my echinacea plants. Those are the pink daisy-like flowers that you see in the middle of summer. And the deer and rabbit spray I have is more effective on deer than rabbits. So what I'm doing this year is being a little proactive and spreading some of the blood meal around. And this discourages rabbits pretty well. You do have to reapply it after each rain. But since we aren't getting any rain, it may let them achieve enough size that the rabbits won't bother them this year. They're very pretty, but the rabbits really ate them last year. The year before that, they ate my asters. So I'm watching these plants to see if the rabbits come in and eat specific plants to their destruction. The iris are budded, and this is a bulb, nectar garlic it's called. It's not something that you eat, but it does have kind of a waterfall shaped bloom that will be coming out of these triangular pods. Some of the allium are in bloom. This is a white one, and we'll see some purple ones a little further along. I've been putting wire around the taller plants to hold them up, and also to remind me they're there. This is a plant I bought last year. It's a new phlox for me. It's called Phlox Nora Lee. And one of the garden magazines said that it was the most effective at attracting butterflies when it was in bloom. So I thought I would try one. But I didn't want to step on it, so I put the support around it to hold it in place and also remind me that it's there. I usually leave my plant tags in about a year until I'm used to where the plants are, and then I remove them. Often they will be destroyed by then anyway. Moving along, we have some poppies, and these will be in bloom probably in about 2 weeks. Anything tulips or daffodils that have gone by, we can just clip off. Here's a tulip that's gone, some iris. Deadheading the bulbs, which is what clipping off the blooms is, helps to have the energy from the leaves go into the bulb instead of into making seed. I have quite enough bulbs. I'll probably plant a few more different varieties, but I want the ones that are here to maintain their vigor, and by preventing the plants from going to seed, that will help the roots. When it comes to roses, I fertilize them in the spring, right as they start to grow. And at this point, before they start to bloom, I'm going to add some fish and seafood fertilizer. And it only takes a 1/4 cup of this to 2 gallons of water. It's 1/8 of a cup per gallon. And I'll just mix that in with the water. And rinse out the cup a little bit. It does smell a little disgusting, but the plants really love it. And I'll put about 1 gallon on each of my roses. We'll start with this one. This is a knockout, pink knockout. Roses need about 5 gallons of water per week to thrive. So they're one of the plants that you definitely would like to keep watered. Most of the late growing perennials are now up. One of the latest to grow is this one, and that is the butterfly weed, which has the orange blossoms in the late summer, early fall. It does come up very late. You have to be careful that you don't plant something over the top of it before it emerges. I have a little primrose right here, and it's getting crowded, and at any time I can come out and dig that up and divide it and move it along so that I have more primroses and can put it on the edge of the borders throughout my garden. I have red ones, I have a yellow one, and several other colors. Blue also in this white or pale pink. So these I've been dividing, and then I put them in different places in the garden. They bloom early, the blooms will be gone by the end of May, and just the foliage will remain. I'm going to move down here looking to see what's in bloom. And this is a tree peony, and I have 2 others, and we'll visit with one a little later. They are just coming into bloom. They have huge, beautiful crepe paper-like blooms. These peonies do not die down to the ground in the winter. I also have peonies that do die down in the winter. They're called herbaceous peonies, and they too are putting on buds. But the Japanese tree peonies bloom a week or 2 before the more common bush peonies that will die to the ground in the winter. They both like a good amount of fertilizer to give their best show. These are English bluebells, and they're in full bloom right now. Another bulb. It's nice to plant bulbs that will give you a longer show of color. And the bluebells are a little later. And of course, lilies come even later than that. And the alliums. And here's the purple allium I was talking about. It's blooming here with daisies that are just about ready to come out. And it has purple balls that are a little taller. There are also some shorter alliums, which I have up further in the garden. And they will be blooming probably in another week or so. They're fully budded right now. And they're low. They're only about 1 foot tall. Again, the roses will get their dose of fish oil, and so will my clematis. This clematis is all budded and should have blooms opening, depending on the weather, within the week. Again, we've suddenly had a really warm spell, and that's just caused everything to accelerate in its growth. Still have a few of the mini iris available. That's a blue and white version. And I still have a few bulbs in bloom, believe it or not. The later tulips are still hanging on in some places. This is a little shadier over here. And I have the last of the narcissus and a few of the botanical tulips. Botanical tulips are smaller. They tend to perennialize. In other words, they tend to come back a little better than the regular fancy taller tulips. And they bloom a little later, and they've been very welcome this year. This particular yellow is called Honky Tonk, and it's had a long season of bloom in this location. Next to it is a plant called leucosium, and leucosium is like a lily of the valley on steroids. It gets quite tall and has little bell-shaped white flowers. And this is the first year I've grown it, and I do like it very much. We'll probably plant it elsewhere to go with some of the later bulbs, especially these botanical tulips. That's how they're listed in the catalogs. And by the way, if you're like the spring bulb show this year, now and until about July 1st is the time to start ordering your bulbs for fall planting. This is a little area along the side of my driveway leading out to the vegetable garden and the rest of the perennial garden. And this is one of the tree peonies I have. And the flowers are really gorgeous while they last, and that isn't too long, unfortunately. In fact, in Japan, I've heard that they sometimes put umbrellas over them when they're in bloom to prolong the bloom a little bit longer. I'm not going to be doing that, but I do enjoy them, and they are just like crepe paper. I do sometimes cut one and bring it into the house and put it into a bowl of water, cool water, just to enjoy it a little close up. But this one is loaded with buds this year, and it really looks nice next to the azalea. I planted the tulips that are behind it. They are called La Belle Epoque, and they have a strange color, kind of a bronze and yellow. But I did plant them to go with this coral bell, which is called caramel, and it has a caramel color, and I thought that the tulips would accent it nicely. Another combination I like is another coral bell or heuchera, and the little miniature iris, which are a dark purple. I think the two shades go well together. Now let's go back to the vegetable garden and see what's happening there. This area is full of plants. It's just outside my vegetable garden. I've been bringing plants out from inside the house to harden off before they go into the garden. And I've also been putting the plants here that I've dug from my garden probably a month ago, and they will be now are firmly potted and will be going to the Garden Club plant sale, which is this Saturday on Town Hill, Saturday morning 9 to 12 on May 22nd. The Garden Club of Norfolk has an annual plant sale. We missed last year thanks to COVID, but this year we're up and running, and we will have not only my plants, but a lot of other plants from which to choose, and our prices are really quite good too. So come on up and enjoy the plant sale on Town Hill. Now I'm going to go into the garden. My fencing is all working, and so far I've had no intruders. I still have lots of things to plant, including seeds, and now that the weather has warmed up, and again that magic 50 degrees at night or very close to it, I can plant things like beans and tomatoes and peppers and all the plants that I will plant. I've planned out my garden on paper so that I have room for everything, trying to determine where I want things, and I try to alter where they are from year to year. It helps with the insect damage if the plants are in a different place. If you keep putting everything in the same place every year, they tend to come back and find it. But hopefully this will help. Today I'm going to plant beans, a few beans, and some cucumbers. I'm going to start out with some green beans. And bean seeds are fairly large, so you can plant them, again, about 3 times their depth. So these would probably be 3/4 to 1 inch deep. I've already dug my trench with my hoe, and I'm going to plant these about 1 inch apart under the line and remove any rocks I can. I have very rocky soil. It's well drained, but I want at least half a row of these green beans. They will germinate fairly fast. We should start to see them in another week, especially if I water them. Again, they do need some water in order to keep growing. And we'll just keep going with these. And I'll plant a few more, but I'll cover these. And again, make sure that the soil is firmly around them. I also have a package of yellow beans, wax beans, and I'll finish the row with those. We really enjoyed having beans in the freezer last winter, so I will endeavor to freeze a few. Pretty easy to do, and it's good to have. The next thing I have is a tripod. This is where I'll plant some cucumbers, and these cucumbers are called Sassy Pickling Cucumbers. And they're really small. At least you pick them when they're really small. And last year I made refrigerator garlic dills. Easy to make and easy to eat. And we enjoyed those too, so hopefully we get a good crop of these little guys. And again, I'll plant these about 2 inches apart. They don't need to be covered quite as deeply. And I'll do the same thing along the other two sides of the tripod. About the time they come up, I will use string to make a framework for these cucumbers to climb. This keeps them from climbing all over the other plants, and it makes them a little easier to pick too. I already have things coming up in here. I have spinach, quite a bit of lettuce, Swiss chard, and kale already coming up, and some radishes as well. Over on the other side of the garden, I've already mulched with straw, and I have the old strawberries, and further over I have a row of new strawberries that we planted last month. The older strawberries are now in blossom, and pending a frost, which I don't think we're going to have, we should get a few strawberries to pick about the first part of June. The garlic is up and running. It will be ready to harvest in July. The peas are also grown, and I have stakes up, but I have not yet put up the netting for them to climb, and that needs to be done very soon because they will start climbing. Raspberries are on the far end of the garden, and then a few spinach starts and lettuce starts that I can start to use anytime. Onions have also been planted. The onion sets that we planted last month are up, and I can start pulling those. I pull about every third one, or every second. I pull two and leave one, and that one will grow into a real onion below. The others I use as scallions. Parsley is from last year. I've planted new parsley at the other end of the garden, but this parsley, Italian parsley and curled parsley, can now be picked and used. And I've been using it regularly, and we'll use some of it today in what I'm cooking. I have my supports up for tomatoes, but I also put a stake in to each support before I plant my tomato plant. I've been using the rhubarb on this side of the garden, and you'll notice that rhubarb is trying to go to seed. And in order, again, to keep the energy in the roots and leaves, I'm going to just cut that off and put it in the compost on my way out of the garden. Before Memorial Day, the rest of the garden will be planted and the plants will be put in. And I will keep watering. I have put out my hose, and I will be out here watering almost every evening that there isn't some rain, unless we really get a good rain, which we could use right about now to keep things going. Things that have come up just need the water to continue to grow. Now let's head down to the shade garden and cool off a little bit. As things start to grow, our crocus foliage is starting to diminish, and other things are coming up. Hostas and also ferns, and I have bleeding heart here that's in bloom. This is a dicentra, and we have some more of these are Spanish hyacinths, wood hyacinths that like a cooler area. I have both those and English bluebells. They're very similar, but they do kind of like a different environment. My hostas are really starting to expand, and I have plants called epimediums, which are these little heart-shaped leafed small plants that kind of crawl. In front of it is a tiarella, another one that likes the shade. And throughout, I have more of the sweet woodruff, which likes to kind of intertwine between the various plants. The hellebores that we've seen the last few months have pretty much finished blooming. And this year I think I will be taking off the bloom stalks now. Some years I leave them, and as a result, they've reseeded all over. And I have what I need, and I was even able to share some with the garden club sale. But I'm going to be taking off many of the bloom shoots this year. Because it's a toxic plant, these will go in the trash rather than in the compost. I don't really want to add that to my vegetable garden. But I'll just snip off the spent blooms. You can see they're already starting to form seed on some of them. And we just don't need more. So I'll be taking these off throughout the garden. It's a little cooler back here, so it's not as bad to work. These are Japanese painted ferns, and they are in shades of white and red and burgundy. And I have a number of different ones, and the color varies, but green, white, burgundy are common colors of different cultivars. You can see some of the younger hellebores coming up right here, so there'll be plenty of new starts for next year to share. It's not the time to get complacent about deer and slugs, especially on hostas. I have a couple new hosta coming up, small ones, and even some large ones, and I will keep spraying them with the deer spray, which helps with deer and rabbits, more so deer. And then I also have the Slug Magic, which is an iron phosphate product, which is safe for pets. Some of the old slug baits were not safe for pets, but I sprinkle some of that around each plant, and you'd be surprised how fast it disappears. The slugs do consume it, and then they expire. So if you keep using it, slug damage will be minimal. And once the plants achieve a certain size, it seems to be a little better. But I use it early and often to keep my hosta leaves looking not like Swiss cheese. Now to go back by the pond. Right now the pond skimmer is barely keeping up with all of the maple seeds that are dropping from the maple trees that surround this garden. But I'll keep clearing it and cleaning it and perhaps using my net a little bit. And pretty soon we'll be clear again. Feeding the fish is something we enjoy doing, and they very soon learn where you stand when you feed them. If you stand in the same place, and they come swimming right up, expecting a meal, and they consume it very quickly. I have my waterfall and with a filter. The water comes through. The skimmer also has a filter, and I will be adding this aerator. I needed a few new parts, which I ordered, and the aerator actually forces air into the water, and this gives a little more oxygen to the fish and to any plants in the pond, and helps with clearing the water. I'll be adding this again before Memorial Day. Lots of things to do before Memorial Day. I've put in my water plants that I kept inside all winter, and I'm not sure they're going to make it. They did not fare well this winter. Usually I can keep things over fairly well, but this year we had an attack of aphids inside, and they just didn't do too well, even though I kept them all in dishpans full of water. I put them in the pond to see how they're going to do. They may or may not survive. There's a little bit of green on each one, so I'm hopeful. We'll see as the season progresses. This is a plant that I did keep inside all winter. Again, in an unheated bedroom. It's a begonia, and I got it out and watered it about a month ago, and back it came, and now is in full bloom, and it will continue to bloom all summer as long as I keep it watered. The heron, plastic heron, has been doing his job, keeping the real heron from eating the fish, and I do need to remember to move him around about once a week. They say that the real heron catches on if you don't move it occasionally, as a real one would move. Otherwise, it can be a good decoy because only one heron will populate a small area. And this area is taken, even though that one doesn't eat fish. All of my ferns and hostas are coming up over on this side. And on the other side of the yard, I have more bluebells and more perennial geraniums that are coming up. I don't think I have any of those in here at the moment, but a lot of hosta. And getting the early things done, now we can just sit in my chair and enjoy the pond and enjoy the birds that are drawn to the area and spend a little time enjoying your garden. That's why it's there. If you have chairs and never sit in them, it's not worth it. So you need to spend some time outside, look up in the trees, see who's flying around up there. Check for butterflies. I've had butterflies come right down to me, hummingbirds, and enjoy the work that you've done to make your garden beautiful. Now let's go up to the patio and see what I've been cooking with some of the things from the garden. We don't get on this side of the garden very often. This is the other side of my backyard, parallel to the fish pond area. And this is a red chestnut tree, and it's just about to come into bloom. And these will open up and are attractive to hummingbirds with their long red flowers. Very pretty tree. Regular chestnut is not this bright red, but this is a red chestnut. Again, I have more of the same types of plants on this side because it's quite shady. We have hosta again, and again I keep it sprayed well. And this is a maidenhair fern, along with other types of ferns, Christmas fern, cinnamon fern, hay-scented fern. I have about 5 varieties of ferns represented in the garden. Some of them just came up. I didn't plant them at all, which is always nice. The other thing that came up were some of the geraniums. These are more of the ferns. And I have throughout the garden the brunera, which has the little blue blooms, and some of the leaves are spotted white, and some of them are almost pure white, different cultivars. I've planted most of the bruneras, but they've kind of spread around. These are the native geraniums, and they are a perennial. And again, I did not plant them. They just come up when and where they will, and I just enjoy them. And they will disappear sometime after they've bloomed, and the foliage will remain, but the blooms are a fleeting thing in spring. More bluebells back here also, and different astilbes that I've planted. I've tried other plants in here, but they really like the woodland plants. This one is pepperbush or clethra, and it has these flowers that will leave seed pods like this, which kind of look like pepper seeds, I guess. So that's why it's often called a pepper bush. But the flowers on this one come in midsummer, and if you right around in Norfolk, in the lower areas, wetter areas, with the windows down in about late July or August, you'll smell this wonderful fragrance. And it's the clethra bushes that grow naturally down in the wet, shady areas. It's really a delightful scent to me, although I guess others can find it a little cloying, but I like it very much. So I've planted it, and it kind of spreads out, and we'll have nice white, long blooms on it. I have a few lilies down here, and I've been watching them closely for lily beetles. These are lilies that prefer the shade, and they have set buds. And I also use deer spray on my lilies because deer like them, and they can be a nice dessert for a deer, and I would like to see them bloom this year instead of feed a deer. I have blue Columbine in here, and these are the ones with spurs, which are long tails on the back of the blooms. And I think I prefer this type. There's a native one that's red and yellow that I have in another spot in the garden. These were cultivated ones that I put in, and the geraniums just kind of grew around them. The cinnamon fern is in the back, and then more hosta here and there that again will expand and fill in for a shady garden. So we can go in now and check out what's been cooking with some of the things from the garden. I've been busy preparing some things from the garden indoors, and we're going to use some of this produce. First thing I made was a strawberry rhubarb pie. I love rhubarb, and I combined it with 1 cup of strawberries that I bought at the market. And this is a rhubarb custard pie, so it's been in the refrigerator because it does have 3 eggs and some milk and sugar and a little nutmeg, and it's poured over the rhubarb and the strawberries and the crust and then baked for about an hour in the oven. The other thing I made was using parsley, which we have quite a bit, and lettuce, which I'm now harvesting the lettuce that I planted with the pansies in my containers near my front yard. So I can use that as a base for my salad. And my salad is made with Bulgar wheat. Bulgar wheat comes in, it's wheat that's been parched or steamed and then dried, and then it's ground into various textures. This was a coarse texture, so it did require some cooking. The very fine texture, you can just pour boiling water over, and that will be sufficient to cook it. Many Bulgar salads, tabbouleh, it's often called, will have tomatoes, basil, peppers, and parsley. Parsley seems to be a universal ingredient, and this one is different. It has parsley and chopped toasted almonds and chopped dried apricots. The dressing is just a little olive oil and a little bit of lemon juice and a little bit of salt. And I'm going to serve that on a lettuce leaf, and I can garnish that with another sprig of parsley. And we'll put that out in front of the salad too. The other thing I made, and I could also put a few of these cherry tomatoes on it that I bought around the edge. I kind of dress it up a little bit. The other thing I started was some May wine, and for that I coarsely just kind of crushed in my hands a good handful of the sweet woodruff, which had been washed, and I put it into white grape juice, just regular Welch's white grape juice, and we let that marinate in the refrigerator overnight. And now I can pour some of it into my wine glass or any type of glass. And I'll fill it about halfway. If a little of the woodruff goes in, it doesn't matter. And then I'll fill the rest with soda water. And this is seltzer, made from the soda stream, which we use. And a few strawberries to garnish it. Fresh ones would be nice. I did not have very fresh ones, but I did have a few. And so this is our May wine, mock May wine. The normal one, again, would be made with a German wine, slightly sweet, and champagne or other sparkling wine. So that's what we've been doing in the garden. Also making some flower arrangements with the beautiful azaleas and the bluebells. Thank you for joining me today. We can also put a piece of the woodruff in our drink as a garnish. You've been watching A Walk in the Garden with Liz Davey on NCTV Norfolk Community Cable.